Welcome to Season 2, Episode 21 of the Amplified Marriage Podcast. Today, it is Canadian Thanksgiving. We are talking about gratitude and how gratitude is the best attitude. Welcome to another episode of Amplified Marriage. I'm Brian.
I'm Natalie.
And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we always say this. Have a coffee, have some tea, some Red Bulls, sit down, listen, where you're working out, where you're going for a run, whatever you're doing. We are so glad that you were able to join us today as we listened and we had this amazing chat.
That's right. And so in case you missed our last episode, we're in this Enneagram series. And our last episode talked about the number 6 on the Enneagram. And for those of you who might just be tuning in, there are 9 numbers on the Enneagram. So we've gone through number 8. And then last episode, we went through number 6, the loyalist, which is my number.
Absolutely.
So I encourage you to go listen to that. Kind of get a little more in depth as to who Brian and I are. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but it's a lot of fun anyways.
Well, it's definitely helped out our marriage.
It sure has.
So today we are talking about being grateful, an attitude of gratitude.
That's right. I think it's so important. Well, today is our Canadian Thanksgiving. So what better way to kind of celebrate that than talking about gratitude and thankfulness, how that looks and how sometimes the reality of what that might look like.
Right.
With ingratitude.
And how to actually respond to each other when sometimes realistically, if you've been in a relationship for any length of time, you really don't always feel like being grateful or offering thankfulness or having, and sometimes it's really easy for the heart of ingratitude to really be the thing that is put out the most.
That's right.
And to really not be thankful for all that your spouse does or all that your boyfriend or girlfriend or your fiance or it's a hard thing to maintain that thankfulness, especially when you feel like you've been ripped off in some cases.
Right. Or your partner has pulled like a Jekyll and Hyde.
Right.
And they're seemingly not the person that you fell in love with. Which was our situation anyways.
Yeah, you turned out to be such a Jekyll.
We're going to start off.
Did you notice, all of you, that you didn't deny it? If you've been listening to us long enough, you know that I'm the Jekyll.
And I hid? I don't know.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was...
Moving on. All right. Romans 12:10 says, love one another with brotherly affection. This part here, though, outdo one another in showing honor.
Right. So we want to lay down just the definition or a version of the definition of ingratitude. And it really means the absence of words and or recognition for what someone has done.
Yep.
Now, in any relationship, and that's in our relationship, there's been long periods. Now it's not as prevalent now as it was then,
right?
Because it's something that we had to learn and we've had to practice. But there was times where we just were not at all very good at being thankful for what the other's doing. No. When we were preparing for this, we were talking about those times that I came home. You want to kind of just lean into that a little bit?
Well, I think there can be an expectation of our spouses or partners of when we're coming home. And for those who have listened long enough, I mean, Brian has said numerous times that he really appreciates like a home cooked meal when he comes home from work. And so because he loves that and he works very hard, I try to make sure that there's dinner ready for him. Now, does that happen all the time? No. So I think this is the one that you're wanting me to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think in our early years, there was an expectation of how things should be when you came home. And for those that are longtime listeners, Brian's expressed in several podcasts that his desire, he loves to have a home-cooked meal when he gets off of work.
Well, I love your home-cooked meal.
And so there were times, I mean, we've got older kids now, but when they were younger, it didn't always go like that. And so there was this almost preconceived notion. And there's times where I had like just a horrible day, or I got bad news, which then just kind of derailed. I had all these like ambitious plans to, you know, surprise you and to make sure everything was ready so that you and I could sit down. I didn't have any other housework to do after that. We could just enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
And then you'd come home and there were toys all over the place. The laundry wasn't done. Dinner certainly wasn't done. And it would set you in such a foul mood.
For a long time it did. Because there was just expectation that it would be done. And then what happens is we had to work that out, because that was just an expectation that it was communicated, but it wasn't always
executed.
Well, executed, but not just that. Like, it was a communicated expectation, but it wasn't something for some reason I was flexible on. Not because I was like, you're going to be at home and you're going to cook me food.
No, it wasn't like that at all. It wasn't where you were like a tyrant and I expect, like, I'm out making the money and I expect you to have.
Although I have said that in jest. And then there was swift retribution for my comments.
Right, because I'm not going to put up with that.
Yeah. So I would come home and it wasn't made. And for the longest time, because we weren't healthy, I was an unhealthy husband. She was an unhealthy wife, and we were responding in such a way that was just constantly unhealthy, no matter what we did. And so even though it was a communicated expectation, and on 90% listeners, she always nailed it. Like, there was this majority of the time the precedent was set. She would make dinner. I'd have something. I was never like a really big concern. But then that 1 or 2 times a month or once every couple of weeks that it would happen, for some reason, I couldn't switch off. And I realized that I had started this cycle of ungratefulness and taking her for granted in all that she did. Now, if you have, right. And if if you're married or just have small children in your house, you know how hard it is sometimes when you have small children to get things done around the house. Yep. And when you have, even at the time, it was just me, Natalie, Raynon, and he was small. Yeah. But all of a sudden there's extra laundry, they're puking on stuff and they're making things dirty and things are happening and the house is not clean. Yeah. Making lunches that, take 25 minutes to make because he's like off running around. He was a really busy young kid. And then you add another one into the mix. Now there's more laundry, there's more food, there's more things going on. Yeah. And it's just chaos.
It's a vicious cycle. So you would come home and then be completely obsessed, I guess, with the fact that I hadn't done it. It was almost, you felt disrespected.
Yeah, I felt disrespected, which is completely such a weird way to, and when I think back to it, it's such a weird way to process that when I wasn't disrespected at all, because she respected me, within the reasons and the space that I had given her to respect me as much as possible. But the cycle had turned into just ungratefulness. I just showed ingratitude. And it wasn't just there. Yep. Like, then it started to permeate into other things. Well, you didn't do this when you said you were going to pay this bill, but you didn't. Yeah. And it would be literally, she paid it the next day, but not on the day that she said she was. Right. And so ungratefulness and just that lack of gratitude just continued to this cycle. Yeah. And all it did was create distance more and more between Natalie and I.
That's right. And then I was ungrateful for you. And I'm like, who does he think he is?
Right.
Like, doesn't he know what kind of day I had?
Right. And here's the other part of that conversation we were having just before we recorded was, you're like, I would come home, dinner wouldn't be ready, and I wouldn't know the type of day that you had. Like, there was I didn't know, you hadn't told me. I had a chance to talk to you on the phone that day. Like we usually talk a couple times a day. That's just how our relationship has always been. That's just the type of people we are, I guess. But I didn't come in the door and she didn't say, hey, this is what happened. This is why things didn't get done. And so, instead of that communication at the end of the day, at some point in the relationship early on, it wouldn't have mattered. Right. I wouldn't have cared. But then I realized I'm being a jerk after she told me so, and not necessarily in so many words, but then in the words, you're being a jerk.
Right. So let me paint a picture of, so that cycle that we're in about, we'll use dinner as an example. You fill in the blanks for your relationship.
Right.
But, so because the response wasn't ideal. Now, I might not have communicated that, but I was in the mindset of like, why should I communicate what kind of a day I had? Duh. He should know. We've got little kids. Stuff's not going to get done.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That was my mindset.
Yeah.
I was like, why? Oh, he thinks I'm going to cook him dinner after he treated me like that?
Right.
This was the internal dialogue. And I probably said this out loud to myself. Oh, he's got another thing coming. Like, we'll see how he responds tomorrow when I purpose myself now.
Not to do it.
Not to do it.
Just to make him mad. Because now I'm going to try and prove a point.
Right?
Thanks for that.
But one of the things, and this was really hard to learn in my marriage, was that I'm called to be generous with my time, with my resources, with making a meal, regardless of the response.
Well, and I think something that
It's a tough pill to swallow.
I think it's one of those things you mentally know that you're supposed to be generous. You mentally know you're supposed to give and not be selfish. You know you're supposed to love, and you know you're supposed to show affection. You know you're supposed to honor. But when you're married and you're faced with that every day, it becomes a heavier cross to bear when you have to get up every day and choose to love that person regardless of their flaws and their faults.
It took years. Honestly, if we're being honest, it took years to get to a place where, regardless of, I had to position myself to be that person.
Yeah.
I had to put aside this thought that I will only extend gratefulness and only extend thankfulness
if I did it first.
Yes. And I had to put my big girl pants on and choose to be that person that extended that, even if it wasn't reciprocated in the way I wanted it.
Right. Because
if that makes sense.
It for many years, and if you are listening to this and you're in that cycle, you could be in this cycle forever unless one of you chooses to just change your stars, change the direction of your relationship, change the direction of your marriage,
change your focus,
fix your focus on something else. Like me and Natalie and I are believers. We're Christians, and we believe that as Christ followers, we have a model, and Jesus has modeled what it means to be someone who is loving and caring and honoring. And so that's the model that we're going to follow. And when we don't reach that model, it's not like Jesus is banging down our doors and be like, hey, you're a failure, and me dying on the cross doesn't mean anything to you anymore. That's not what it is. If he can extend grace for the things that I've done and mercy and forgiveness for the things that I've done, then I have the strength and the mercy to be able to extend those towards my spouse.
That's right. And literally, that is the thought process that transformed our marriage.
Absolutely. Because we were not functioning in a way that was remotely healthy.
No.
And the circle, and Natalie was actually one that broke the cycle. Now, we'll get to that in a little bit. There's something practically that we're going to offer up, just that it was super helpful for our relationship. We want to break that down for you at the end. But we just want to kind of just talk about a few things that can kind of get in our way when it comes to being grateful, but developing a heart of ingratitude, right? And moving towards that place of why we get to being ungrateful.
Right.
Right.
What is standing in our way? What attitudes might we possess that really can kind of be that wedge?
Right. And the very first one that we want to talk about is entitlement. We have this odd attitude of entitlement. Now, when you're married, there is, the Bible even says two become one. A threefold cord might not be broken.
Right.
And we become one flesh. So there is this attitude of oneness, but there also doesn't come with that an attitude of entitlement that says, I'm going to do things and be a certain way and do all of these things, and you're going to do them for me because I'm entitled to that.
Yeah, you owe me.
You owe me, even though and the attitude, there's no even though, there's no why, there's just you owe me.
Yeah.
That's the attitude of entitlement. There doesn't need to be a why. We see it in our culture constantly. We see it in our jobs, in the way we exist. We see it in our churches and everything. We see this attitude of entitlement. And here's the truth. And even when I preached on Sunday, I said this said, the world doesn't owe you anything, and your spouse, they don't owe you anything. What you owe them is everything that you have, everything that you are, because that's the covenant that you made between you and your spouse.
Right. Don't hold things back.
Because they may be holding something back from you.
That's right. And that was that whole thing of be the change
That
like
you want.
You can be the change.
Right.
You can shift your focus off of yourself.
Right.
And it's hard, guys. It's so hard to shift because I want to be right. I don't want to have to be the one that's like, maybe I'm the problem.
Right.
Right?
And the best way to start having change in your relationship is if you're willing to say, well, hey, what's my part in this? And you've heard us say this all the time. Be accountable. Take responsibility for your side of the actions.
That's right.
We have watched and coached couples where even just one side of it, him or her,
That's right.
has said, okay, I'm going to take responsibility for my actions. I'm going to start making a change and start loving my spouse the way I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
And it honestly, it doesn't take long before the other half of this starts to see something and feel something different in the relationship that actually helps turn that upended ship right back on its proper side. And all of a sudden they start moving forward together.
That's right. And if we're going to stay on this whole thing of like the cooking of the meals, just so that it's kind of cohesive and people can understand, it's something easy. You had an entitled attitude.
Oh, 100%.
Of I work outside the home all day. Not that you
I didn't lord that over you.
No, you didn't. You never lorded over me, but there was that attitude.
It was ingrained in me
that I work outside of the home all day, and I'm expecting a home cooked meal. Yeah. Now, yes, I did everything I could to just kind of like stab you with my words and whatever of like you think you're going to treat me like a doormat? Heck no. And no one should treat anybody like a doormat. This is just how quickly that can come in. I had to shift my focus of like, okay, he might have this ungrateful attitude when things don't get done. But if we're doing the same thing and expecting a different result, that's insanity.
Right.
So clearly he's not going to be the bigger person in this situation. So what can I do? And at first, honestly, my motivation was probably really selfish. Like if we're being, I am being honest, it was selfish, but I was like, I'm going to shift my focus. Right. And if being at home, raising my kids, which is a huge calling on our lives, then Lord, you're going to need to help me to serve a meal to my husband out of a spirit of gratefulness for him, regardless if he doesn't see it or express gratitude or anything like that. And it became something for me. Yep. It wasn't about you, right? The shift happened for me.
So what you're saying is once the shift happened and you realized it started out as selfish role.
Yeah, it was about.
Yeah. So
it was about me.
So what you realized is that serving and loving another is not about how they feel about it. It's about what you're doing for you.
That's
right. You're doing the right thing. You're doing the honorable thing.
Exactly.
Because you took responsibility for your actions and situations, even though I didn't give you a whole lot to work with a lot of the times.
That's true, right? And I honestly could not have done it had I not heard the Lord speak to me about, this is what I've created you to do. This is your job right now.
Right.
You're a mom. Yeah. You're a wife. At this, there's no greater calling. Right? And so I had to kind of get off my own pedestal of being ungrateful, like deep down, of the fact that I was at home because I gave up my career and all of that. And I don't regret giving it up, but there was a process I had to go through where I wasn't resentful at the fact of I had to be at home. Yeah. So I embraced my role as a wife and a mom, and it became about serving out of that place. Right. Of like, Lord, this is what you've called me to do. And because you've called me to do that, you've equipped me with the necessary skills and abilities to execute this well. Yeah. And it's not even about my spouse. It's about, what am I doing that's bringing you glory? What am I doing in my day that's bringing God glory? Well, if he's called me to be in this place right now, then everything I do, if I'm mopping the floors, if I'm whatever, it's for his glory.
Right.
It had nothing to do with you. And I really had to separate that from getting validation from you, because at the end of the day, it didn't matter. I was pleasing God.
Yeah, right. And even though it had nothing to do with me ultimately, it benefited our relationship immensely. And that's when things changed.
Hugely.
Right? So that's really good the way that you put that. The next thing is something that kind of gets in the way of gratitude is pain and pain.
Yeah.
Is that we were hurt people. And when you've all heard that statement, hurt people hurt people. Now, I know you don't like that one specifically for the reason that you know lots of people that were hurting or are hurting that are still generous with people or good. What I mean by that, and I just want to clarify, is hurt people hurt people. Hurt people that are living in their bitterness, that are living in their anger, they're living in their frustration, living in their entitlement, living in this place where that's all they have, that's all they know, and they're doing nothing to heal themselves. Those types of people hurt other people.
Yes, they do.
And so you can't see anything that's good when you're just, your lens for your relationship is the pain that you have.
That's right. And I would caution using that as a crutch.
Right.
For not changing.
Right.
Right. And I think that's my issue with that statement, is there are plenty of people that have had broken, horrific tragedies and trauma that they've walked through that are still seeing the good in other people. They don't go out murdering people just because they grew up in a household that was toxic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How just because you are hurt does not
give you the right
to then be hurtful to other people. You can change that cycle.
Yeah. And that's what we're saying, is that you can change the cycle in your relationship. If you choose this is where you want to go, however the relationship ends.
You're responsible for what you say and what you do.
Absolutely. And that's what we were getting to. Now, unforgiveness is one of those things also that gets in the way. Unforgiveness is draining. We also have experienced tremendous amount of unforgiveness in our relationship.
Yep.
We did not forgive each other for so many things for so many years. It's much like offense. And I said that you've heard this say before, is it's much like offense. Unforgiveness and offense very much have the same type of attitude. You gather people around you to ally yourself, so you can you're not going to forgive them. You're going to be offended with other people, but it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Exactly.
Right. And so you get all forgiveness in your heart. You don't forgive your spouse. You don't forgive the other person across from you, and it eats you alive from the inside out. And again, that becomes a lens in which you see your spouse.
That's right. And forgiveness is for you.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is what sets you free from whatever has happened. It's not about the other person. Because if you're in a state of like when I was in a state of unforgiveness towards you, you were still sleeping so soundly at night. It used to make me so mad because I was the one up. I was the one in turmoil.
Right.
You weren't.
No.
Or seemingly anyways. And how often is that when we're walking in a spirit of unforgiveness towards someone else, chances are that person has no idea.
Right.
They're not losing sleep over it.
But you sure are.
We are.
Yeah.
Right? Or I am.
Yeah.
So unforgiveness is for me, or extending forgiveness to my spouse, to my husband. That's for me, so that these roots of bitterness and offense and ungratefulness and resentment don't take root and grow.
That's right.
It's to set me free.
Absolutely. And so there are
whether or not I think you deserve it.
Well, unforgiveness really has nothing to do whether or not I deserve it or not. And that's the trick about forgiveness is when you forgive someone, you're forgiving them because it's good for you, not necessarily good for them.
That's right. It doesn't eliminate.
It releases you. It gives you freedom and brings you healing and life and joy.
Yeah. It certainly doesn't sweep the issues under the rug.
No, you're letting it go.
Yeah.
And forgive. You've heard of say this before. Forgive does not mean forget.
No.
That is the dumbest. Forgive and forget. Forgive and forget is the stupidest thing anyone can possibly do.
Right.
Like someone brought up to me one time, says like, if you knew that a babysitter that you hired molested one of your kids, you forgave them, are you just going to forget what they did and let them babysit again?
Heck no.
Right? Like forgive and forget is the dumbest thing ever. Please don't
speak that to people. You need to forgive and forget.
No, you need to forgive them because we believe, and we've had to experience this with our own family members and things that we've had to walk through in life that we've had to forgive for, but we don't forget.
No.
And it doesn't mean you
and there are
immediately...
boundaries.
And there are boundaries, and you have to set up boundaries, and you
Yes.
have to rebuild trust, and you have to... So...
And forgiveness, it's not an overnight thing at times.
Nope. And
There are times, like, I know of specific instances in my own life where it has taken me 7 years
right.
to come to that place where I could fully forgive the situation
Yep.
and the person that was responsible
Yeah,
for it.
absolutely.
Right? But so please hear us.
Yeah. And so here's the interesting thing, though. If you go to this place and you decide that you want to live this life of being grateful, of being forgiving, honoring the spouse, and doing the best that you can to change. Now, there's some actual scientific benefits.
Okay, so we started with all the doom and gloom.
Yep. Now we're going to leave you with some benefits and one practical thing we want you to practice this coming week, in this coming 2 weeks.
The good things about being...
Good things. But here's some good things about benefits of being thankful and having an attitude of gratefulness. And what it does is it actually changes the molecular structure of your brain. It literally rewires it and changes the neural pathways to change things into a positive aspect.
That's incredible, because like the word says to take your thoughts captive.
Right.
So if it can start with something as simple as just being thankful,
right,
or just being grateful for the things that you have, that can be that very thing that rewires your brain.
Right.
I mean, this isn't unattainable.
Right.
Like
it's something that we can all do.
Yes.
Absolutely. So it increases gray matter, which this helps with all of our cognitive functioning. So when we're in a better state and we have a better space and we have an attitude of gratefulness, we actually cognitively are sharper.
That's right. Which we could all use.
It's like when we eat properly. If we eat properly, we're sharper.
That's right.
Right? So it boosts the neurotransmitter serotonin and stimulates the brainstem to produce dopamine.
Right.
Which is the happy drug.
That's
when
right.
we have dopamine, we're feeling good. It's dopamine is the same shot of dopamine happens whenever we receive a text message. We get that little bing, ooh, someone loves me, and then we get we get all happy when we get a text message.
It helps us release toxic emotions, and it helps us to manage stress. So if we're living a life of stress and anxiety, perhaps this is suggesting turning on that attitude of gratefulness and thankfulness could be the very thing that switches that around.
Right. It also lowers our blood pressure. Being grateful lowers our blood pressure. Do you know what being grateful also does? It lets you see the silver lining in every situation instead of only the bad things in everything.
That's right. And it lowers your cortisol levels.
Right. So, which means that you can also get a better amount of sleep because now you're being grateful and you're not letting the doom and gloom be the thing that drives your every decision.
Right? Being thankful and living a life of thankfulness motivates us to take better care of ourselves. So we can exercise better. We can eat healthier.
I wish I could say I could successfully, with an attitude of gratitude.
But have we tried that?
Be a better exerciser and eat better.
I don't know if we've actually tried that. Maybe that can be part of our challenge.
But it strengthens our immune system because it's stressful on our body to always be the negative Nancy.
Yeah. When we're bitter and we're negative and we're grumpy and we're cynical, it's not healthy.
It takes more work.
Yeah.
Right.
It takes more energy and more muscle to frown than it does to smile.
Right.
So
it's a natural antidepressant and helps with relieving of pain. Being gratitude.
Being grateful.
Being gratitude. Being grateful is what I meant.
That's right. And so maybe it's time to start a grateful journal or to document the things in your life that you're thankful for.
Can you talk about, the challenge? Let's talk about the challenge. I really want to get to the challenge.
Okay, so one of the things early on, or not early on, we've been married for 20 years. So this is year, I think it was like 10 or 11. So it took a long time.
Okay, I was going to say I'm the one that usually forgets how long we've been married for.
But yeah, so I was challenged in my own self about how to respect you, how to respect my spouse. And I came across an article, and the article gave like a bunch of suggestions of like ways that you could reach your spouse, or I forget what the actual title of the article was, but one of the ways that they suggested was creating a thankful text or a thankful note to your spouse. And so I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, nothing we've done so far, nothing I've tried so far has worked. How can I be so sure that this is going to work? So I'm like, well, what harm could it do? Because remember, it's not about my spouse. It's about me healing and becoming a better whole person. So I took the challenge. I'm like, well, we'll see. It honestly, guys, it took me 2 months to think of something that I was thankful for, other than like, oh, you've got great hair, or you've got, blue eyes.
You have good skin.
I really wanted to go deep into his character, because I'm like,
2
hey,
months.
Lord.
Man, I really didn't give you much to work with, eh? Like, it was a bad period of time in our relationship.
It was really, really
because
hard.
let's face it, I'm pretty awesome. So there should have been.
You are.
What?
Right.
You married me for a reason. They were just hidden qualities.
But they were hidden. And I was like, hey, I fell in love with this guy enough to marry him. Clearly, there's something there. And I was like, Lord, you really got to help me think deeper. I wanted really characteristics of you that I fell in love with. So for me, it took 2 months. Maybe you'll be able to think of something right off the fly. But our challenge is, think of one thing that you are thankful for your spouse or your partner for whatever they're in.
And express your gratitude
without expecting a response of, well, oh, now that you've said that to me, well, this is something I'm thankful for about you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Just
without expecting a response in return.
Or a return. You're just being grateful because your spouse is awesome and that's what you want to do. And so we want you to take one thing for the next 14 days and text them, write them a little note, leave it on their pillow, do something on their, just let them know that you're grateful for just one thing.
That's right. It could be, I'm grateful for how hard you work.
Right? I'm grateful for your great head of hair.
Right. And it could be that. It could be physically speaking,
but
just to get the ball rolling.
But we want to challenge you to go deep into the reasons that you married them. Now, if you married them because their hair was great, that's cool. That's only one day. But there has to be other reasons why you married them, because they love other people, because they love you. They were graceful. They had mercy. They have a great sense of humor. They had really dark sense of humor. Like, why did you fall in love for your spouse? Why do you love them? And then text them once a day, or message them once a day, or leave a note once a day, and just let them know how grateful you are for them.
That's right.
So we're very excited, and what we'd like you to do with that is we'd also like you to send us an email if you get an exciting response and just something to say, hey, this actually is something that we're going to implement, we're going to do. Just let us know. We want to hear testimonies of how it went when you did this with your spouse, with your partner, with your boyfriend, or with your girlfriend. We just want to know about how it went with your spouse, and just be excited for you so we can be excited with you. To let us know.
We're cheering you on.
We are supporting you and everything. So you can let us know on Instagram. You can let us know on Facebook. And, if you really are enjoying this podcast, it just means so much to us when you actually share it, let people know about it. Email us. You can email us at amplifiedmarriage@gmail.com. If you have any questions or a topic you want to discuss, that's also where you can let us know how this challenge went this last week. And as you have heard us say many times before, we believe that marriage can be reset,
refreshed,
recharged,
and restored.
Thanks so much for listening.
Talk to you soon.